beginning with the protagonist Charles Bronson telling incidents from his childhood and youth to his adulthood as if he were in a theater with a live audience. The story takes the shape of a vaudeville act. He speaks to the camera in bits and pieces, displaying bipolar traits, and there are other times when he just looks blankly at the audience, despite the lack of response from the audience. In addition, there are scenes that depict Bronson as being violently attacked by security personnel and displayed with serious injuries in a cage, illustrating his combative nature. Despite this uncomfortable situation, Bronson's character in the theater chuckles aloud, and then reveals a credit card that claims the movie is based on a true tale. He remarks that there was nothing wrong with his thinking when he was a newborn or a toddler, but that when he was a child, he started robbing, which annoyed his classmates and frequently led to fights that he always won. Out of rage, he even threw a table at a teacher and beat him to the ground. When Bronson got into fights at school, he would always contact his mother, but she would usually brush them off. He clarifies that although he was a violent youngster all his life, he was not bad, since he still adhered to his moral values. He used to steal when no one was around, but he grabbed the first job he could at a dining restaurant. Nevertheless, he gave some of the profits to a coworker he felt a connection to. According to Bronson's narrative, he was born Michael Peterson, but later adopted the renowned alter ego Charlie Bronson. When he was younger, the police tried to arrest him, but Bronson would fight back by hitting the officers with his fists. He even rips out a police officer's ear with his mouth during one of the bouts. After having their baby, he and his old co-worker Irene relocated to a cheap house in England in 1974. Bronson appeared to have accepted his new family life, if not enjoyed it. Following a string of violent incidents and thefts at a post office, Bronson is sentenced to 7 years in prison. His mother is hopeful that the term would be reduced to 4 years. In front of his wife, who he will never see again, Bronson is now mute. During his performance, Bronson displays images from a rooftop protest he organized in the city, and claims to have caused the system tens of millions of pounds worth of damages. He now bills himself as Britain's most costly prisoner. He is discharged with the determination to see what the world has in store for him after these riots, after which he is deemed mentally sane. The purpose of his final encounter in prison was to return his possessions, which included a comb, a leather wallet, and a wristwatch, the last one being a joke because of Bronson's baldness. His parents, who have moved to a new home, welcome him back and show him where he will now be sleeping. Bronson finds out that a lot of the items from his early years were abandoned in his former Luton home. Bronson talks about how his Uncle Jack knows everyone and could be able to assist him in getting his belongings back. After traveling to Luton, Bronson encounters his colorful Uncle Jack, who owns a brothel and treats him like a foreign guest. Every woman in there approaches Bronson more closely, winning him over with a mixed drink. A former prisoner who complimented Bronson's fists while serving tea was another person from Bronson's time at Luton. This guy offers Bronson, who needs a new stage name, a fighting business. His companion recommends. Contrary to popular belief, Bronson is first disturbed by his entrance to prison. However, he soon makes fun of himself in the story, claiming he has always thought of himself as a comedian and dressing like a clown. He compared his cell to a hotel room, where he was isolated from the outside world, and had to pace in circles all year long. He becomes furious and refuses to finish his sewing, which leads to several guards beating him down. Because of his arrogant demeanor when officiating in prison, Bronson was well liked by his fellow inmates. Nonetheless, he had more unpleasant interactions with the guards, which led to the assignment of other tasks, such serving tea, which he accomplishes fairly well. It's the first time someone has ever said anything positive about his fists, so a fellow prisoner compliments them while he's serving. He is stunned by this remark. Bronson considers prison to be the ideal setting for him, and refers to himself as Britain's most violent prisoner. It displays a number of newspaper articles that depict Bronson as a prisoner who is out of control and aspires to be a famous person. The only thing that bothered him was having to go from prison to prison all the time. He thought back to his time in Parkhurst, when he was treated like royalty despite having to deal with guards all the time. He likes his new lifestyle, which has recently led him to wind up in a mental institution known as the Funny Farm, where residents cover their faces with excrement and he needs the support of up to 4 guys in order to subdue him. Throughout his visit, Bronson does a fantastic job portraying a mentally ill patient who is forced to undergo forced medical procedures that keep him unconscious much of the time. During leisure time, a patient tries to discuss his pedophilic inclinations with the drugged Bronson, but all he can manage to say is nonsense that he spits out in denial. The few efforts at escape are undertaken while he is subdued and incapable of even walking normally. In one instance, He was in a nightclub and was hardly able to move. A staff member motioned for him to return with the others, and there was nothing Bronson could do about it. In the midst of his grandiose fantasies, Bronson gets the idea to kill a patient at the sanitarium in order to go back to jail. They are all crazy, after all, and he chooses the pedophile who spoke with him first. Although this effort is unsuccessful, he is nonetheless sentenced to 26 years in solitary confinement, which he finds harsh, given that he has never killed anyone. He performs this as a side-to-side display, and explains that he was not given a trial prior to this decision. When Bronson sees Allison standing in front of him, she tells him that she doesn't love him because he lacks ambition. At that point, Bronson proposes to her. Sadly, she announces that she will wed Brian, breaking Bronson's heart as he congratulates her. After revealing to the audience that the robber saleswoman had actually contacted the police 15 minutes earlier, he sends Bronson back to jail following his 69-day release. The jail governor finds it amusing that Bronson responded to a question about his activities during the 69 days by saying that he was creating an empire. When Bronson returns to his cell, a librarian guard named Andy Love leaves him something to read. However, Bronson locks the door and calls the other guards, because he has a new captive, whom he curses and yells at. Bronson yells at Andy to help him smear his nude body with petroleum jelly so he can confront those pursuing him more easily, knowing that they will go to save the guard. But Bronson is no match for everyone. He was severely injured, and had to be muzzled when placed in a different cell. The governor of the prison warns him that if he keeps up his pessimistic attitude, he will perish there. Following some encouraging remarks from his Spanish learner art teacher, Mr. Daniels, in the art room, Bronson discovers that he enjoys painting, particularly bird representations. His instructor instructs him to locate the item that is missing and doesn't belong there. A brief animated segment depicts some of Bronson's insane ideas up until he speaks with the jail governor, who wishes him well in his new career as an artist, though Bronson doesn't appear to take it well. Reluctantly, Bronson provides the governor a sample of his work because of Mr. Daniels. Although his teacher supports him in his new endeavors, Bronson ends up hitting him from behind because he misunderstands what happened and thinks Mr. Daniels was trying to take advantage of his skill. Following this, Bronson receives applause from the crowd on stage before leaving shortly after. Now that he's occupied with crafts and painting Mr. Daniels' face, Bronson believes he has completed his painting and tells the guards they can enter and rescue their captive, ready for the impending battle. Despite Bronson's best efforts, the guards eventually manage to subdue him and bring him to the ground. The screen fades to dark, and lettering reads, "The real Charles Bronson has been in prison for 34 years, 30 of those years being spent in solitary confinement, with no known date of release." A bleeding Bronson is shown, moaning in agony, inside a tiny cage that won't even let him sit up. The doors that will allow Bronson to take his final breath of fresh air are closed by two guards, leaving him by himself.